Hi, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of artbyrow.com, where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials and everything art related. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to head on over to the art studio and do some drawings. I hope you'll grab a pencil and some paper and draw along with us today. I know you'll have fun. Let's head on over to the studio.
All right, here we go. So today we're going to draw an alien. There are so many different ways to draw these. This is just one way, just something to get you started. I would encourage you to explore some different variations with these. There's just so many different ways you can draw them. I like doing a series of drawings, which I'll typically do 7. 7's just a number that I like. It feels right. It lets me push my creativity a little bit. So I'm going to show you one of the ways. And this is more or less just kind of your typical, what you would consider just your average alien, I guess. So I always like starting with some simple shapes. So for the main part of the head, we're going to draw a circle. And you can put these contour lines in to show a little bit of what direction he's going to be looking. Because if you draw your circle, that doesn't really tell you where things are going to be placed. So by drawing a couple guidelines for the direction it's going to go in, that makes things a little bit easier. And then I like to bring kind of a chopped off triangle down, because typically when I think of aliens, they have those long stretched out faces, and we can do that just by adding this little chopped off kind of a triangle. And these are just guidelines. They serve many purposes for me. One is to start getting those first marks on the paper. The other thing is that it allows you to get that placement down, the size down. If this isn't where I want this guy to be on my drawing plane, then I know I can erase that now and move things around before I spend too much time on this and get too far into it. So, and the big thing is just getting over that blank page syndrome of just staring at it and being afraid to get started. It's real easy to throw down just some basic simple shapes, triangles, circles, squares, whatever. So here's the little indication of where the nose is going to be. And again, this is just to start building out what this is going to look like. I like starting with the eyes. And aliens, what I think of typically is big slanted eyes. So the eyes we want to be at a slant. We can draw some guidelines for that as well. Or not. It's up to you. It really kind of depends on what your comfort level is. I've not drawn a ton of these. I did my original series of 7 that I did a while back. Just experimenting, trying some new things. But depending on how comfortable you are, you may need more or less guidelines to help you get going. And then for the nose, I'm going to make a couple little like kind of slivers, triangle slivers for the nose. And again, there's so many different ways you can do this. I mean, we really don't know what an alien would actually look like. What we know is what we see on the movies. So you can really kind of do whatever you want. And then there's some other things you can consider, like Do you want your alien to be something that is feared and ominous, or is it something that you want to be more friendly? And all these things can determine how you draw your alien out. So it's just a matter of kind of that look and feel you want with your drawings. So all I'm doing is just shaping out the face, drawing in some cheekbones, adding in the chin, and of course, again, so many different ways you can draw the shape of the face, the nose, the eyes, everything. Anything is kind of open to interpretation, I guess you could say. And then for the head, sometimes the aliens you'll see them with more of a pointed head. Sometimes you see them with a big round head. All these things are going to change the overall look and feel of your drawings, which is why it's so beneficial to do a series of drawings. Because if you're just doing a one and done kind of drawing, then you're missing out on these opportunities to experiment and try different things. You might draw it one way when a different way would maybe feel better to you at the end, but you don't know unless you're doing it. And it's one thing to just copy something, and it's, as an artist, it's another thing entirely to do something that's your own. And copying has its place because it's part of developing those skill sets. But also you want to be able to come up with your own drawings, your own original works, because that's what really starts to get fulfilling, I think. I think that's where a lot of artists struggle when they're learning, is that they're doing these things and putting the time and the effort into it and can't figure out why it doesn't feel good or why they don't feel fulfilled. Because if all you're doing is copying something that somebody else is doing, looking at something and recreating it, then you don't have that sense of creativity. And that's why I always encourage doing these series of drawings, because it allows you to experiment, try new things. And by the way, I should mention, I am doing this drawing today, which I do many of my drawings on artist trading cards, because that fits into that concept of doing a series of drawings, because it's such a great time saver. And then you can put them in these little card sleeves. You can keep a portfolio of your work. You could trade them. The intention of artist trading cards is to trade them with other artists for their artwork, which that's totally optional. You could just simply keep them for yourself and just have a portfolio of your artwork. It's nice to be able to flip through and see how much you've improved and go back and look at some of your older drawings, maybe for a little inspiration or whatnot. So I cleaned this up a little bit. I erased some of the areas. And you can keep going back and forth and reworking it as much as you feel like you want to. I think it's better to not spend a ton of time. I think it's actually better to just knock out a bunch of drawings fairly quickly and not labor over them too much. Try something, go for it. As you're doing it, think about different ways you could have done it, and then do another one. And we're, I don't know, about 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes into this drawing, which if I was just drawing and not talking at the same time, and I'm going in and I'm cleaning it up so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing, which takes more time. Normally I would just go through my drawing process and then clean it up later. So already I have my drawing pretty much finished, the sketch of it anyway, and it hasn't even been 5 minutes. So by working small, whether it's on artist trading cards or something else, working small really opens up a lot of opportunity to experiment, do a series of drawing, try some different things. So there's the sketch, not even 5 minutes in. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add my outline. Okay, so for my outlines, I like using these Sharpie pens. They're waterproof, they don't bleed a whole lot. They come in different sizes. These are different than the Sharpie markers. This is a Sharpie pen. You can use whatever you want. Probably, in my opinion, the best thing to use would be a brush pen. But using a brush pen, there's a bit of a learning curve. It takes a little bit of practice to be able to control your lines. So the benefit of a brush pen is that you can get some really nice variations of the line weight, which will drastically improve the overall look of your drawings. If you're proficient at it, which I am not, I haven't used a brush pen in many, many years, and I am looking to see if I can find mine. Find one. I have several, but so I don't know how much you can see this, but the tip tapers off and it's flexible. So what happens is as you apply pressure with the brush, it gets wider, and as you use less pressure, your line will get thinner. So it makes it really easy to get some nice line variations, but you have to be able to control that variation as you're drawing, which can be challenging. And it's really just a matter of practice. It's not something that you would be able to just pick up one day and start making these really nice lines. You'd have to practice at it a little bit. So that's something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and I just haven't made it a priority yet. I probably should. And I think I've probably been talking about this for who knows how long. It's probably been a couple years by now. You know how it is. Time gets away from you and you say you're going to do it. And it's one of those someday things, but someday never seems to come. But like with anything, if it's a priority, you have to make a plan, break it down into the different tasks that are involved, and then execute the plan. And I have not developed a plan of what I need to do to get back into using the brush pen. Excuse me. So all I'm doing, just simply just tracing back over the lines. So this is where the brush pen would really be nice. After you put in your outline, which of course, again, so many different ways you can do your outline. I usually want to go back in and thicken up some of the areas so it's not just one consistent line weight. That's boring to me. If you like your lines to be consistent, then by all means, that's how you should do it. Pretty much everything when creating art is a matter of personal preference. We can say there's rules and there's right and wrong ways to do things when it comes to art, but I don't really agree with that. I think, especially if you are a hobby artist, which means you create art for your own enjoyment, then I think feeling the freedom to be able to experiment and try new things and make things your own and make mistakes is a very critical part of that process. Like I said, especially if you're a hobby artist, you're just doing these for yourself. You're not trying to make a living at it, which out of all the people creating art, I think there's way more that are not trying to make a living at it than ones that are. So I'm going to go back in with this thicker marker. So one thing I do want to mention is that you can make your outlines with whatever type of marker or pen that you want. I tend to put a black outline on my drawings, but you could use any color. And I think that's also part of that process of doing a series, would be maybe to try what would this look like with a green, you know, like maybe a dark green outline. They have, so these Sharpie pens come in different colors. This is a pink one. And the reason I like using these, even if I want a thicker line, I'll go back over with my pen, because the thicker markers, so you see I filled in the bigger areas with this black. The regular markers tend to bleed on the paper and it makes more of a fuzzy outline, where that pen makes a nice crisp sharp outline. So even if I want a heavy outline, which I'll do a lot on my graffiti drawings, I'll go back over it and keep making it, the lines wider and darker. And I'll still do that with the pen because I like how sharp of an outline it makes. Where if you use, like, you know, a Sharpie marker, then that ink tends to bleed. And it's not bad, but it does leave a fuzzier outline that I think is noticeable. It doesn't necessarily ruin the drawing, in my opinion, but I don't like the fuzzy edges, so I tend to use the Sharpie pen. But you should use whatever feels comfortable to you, whatever your preference is, or maybe it comes down to just what you have access to. If you're limited on your supplies, then I think it's fine to just use whatever you have. So that's it for the outline. I'm going to be coloring this with marker. So the next thing is going to be to start putting the marker in. So what I do is, before I start adding my colors, I'll take these little scrap pieces of cardstock, and these are left over from when I cut out my artist trading cards. So what I do is take a full sheet of cardstock. You can get 10 blank artist trading cards out of one sheet and you have some little pieces left over at the edges. And then what I do is I cut these down into these little rectangles, and then I can use them to see what my colors are going to look like together. Because the way I do my colors with my drawings is that I want them to blend together most of the time. So I need to make sure that these colors are close enough together that they will blend. And I'm trying to find... So with markers, you'll want to put a piece of paper underneath it. Especially like if you're working in a sketchbook, then you're going to want to put paper in between the pages, because if you're using markers, the markers will bleed through. And I am using, these are alcohol markers. Like with everything in art, there's a million different brands. And I think for the most part with the markers, with choosing which markers you want to use, I think the biggest thing is your budget, because markers are anywhere from fairly cheap to super expensive. It also depends on what you're using them for. So if you're doing some kind of commission work, then maybe you don't want to use cheaper markers. Like if you're an illustrator and you need your artwork to be long lasting and to not fade or yellow, if those are a concern for you, then you would definitely not want to use cheaper markers. But if you're just doing things for your own, just your own personal, like I create my artwork because it's relaxing to me. That's the only reason that I do it. I do it because I enjoy it. I'm not trying to be a famous artist, not trying to be, I'm not trying to make money with my art. I make art because I enjoy it. I make these videos and teach other people what I do because I miss being an art teacher. At one time, I was a classroom art teacher and needed to change careers. I think most people know that teachers don't get paid very well. So sometimes it's hard to support your family on the income of a teacher's salary. But I got to a point in my life where I just really missed having a community of people working on artwork, and I missed working with those people and inspiring, trying to motivate. So that's the reason for these videos, is just to try to inspire and encourage people to do some artwork, make it their own. But so back to the markers. I should mention the way I work is that I will put down the lightest color first, and then I'll start layering the darker colors. And with markers or color pencils, paint, whatever it is you're using, by using multiple colors or multiple markers, these are all green, but it's different greens, so you want to try to use 2 or 3 different markers, so different shades of green or whatever. I mean, I guess aliens don't have to be green. You could use yellow, you could use browns, blue, whatever. But regardless of whatever colors you're using, if you want to avoid your drawings looking flat, then it's important to layer in some different shades of that color or other colors that would complement it, because it'll make it look less flat. But if you want the style, it depends on the style. So if the style you're going for, sorry, bumped the camera. If the style you're going for is a flatter look, if that's what you're after, then you wouldn't need to do this. But if you're trying to add a little more depth to your drawings, then what you would want to do is add in some darks and lights and midtones. So I'm using 3, so I basically have a light, medium, and dark of the green. And that just breaks up these big areas. I don't like the big areas of color. When I do my drawings, I'm not looking at the light source and which direction the light's coming from and all those sorts of things. That's not the level of where I'm going with my art. I don't really know how to explain that, but I'm not worried about adding a lot of depth and trying to make it realistic or anything like that. So I don't worry too much about my light source and the direction and all of that. And you could, if that's something you want to work on, or if you want to make it look more chiseled out and three-dimensional, or if you're going for a more realistic style, those things become more important. But I think you have to know what your intentions are with your artwork. Like I said, if you're a hobby artist and you're creating artwork because it's enjoyable and relaxing and it's fun and you're just doing it for yourself, then you need to think about how important are those things really. Because if I'm just doing this for myself, then I don't need to stress out about all these different things and trying to impress people. I think too often someone's trying to develop their art skills and they're looking for approval from people on the internet. And typically what tends to happen is that pretty much ends up backfiring, because people on the internet can be mean for no particular reason, just because they're hiding behind their computers and they're going to be mean to people just because they can, and there's no repercussions from it. So for these aliens, for this type of a drawing, I like to put these galaxies in the background. So I have these 4 markers that I already have set aside that I know blend well together. So I have these little marker cubbies to store my markers in. And I have these particular markers separated out so that I don't have to hunt for them. I use them periodically, and for the most part, I don't really use them for anything else. They're not colors that I would typically use. And one of the things I should mention is that when you're using alcohol markers and you're blending them, you need to make sure you're working while they're wet, or they won't blend together. Once they dry out, they're not going to blend. So I tend to go back and forth with my colors so that I can make sure they don't dry out. And they take a little bit of time for the alcohol to evaporate out of them. But I find it's a little bit easier to just have this system of working back and forth. And I'm putting these down pretty much just in a random way. I don't really have any type of pattern or anything like that I'm trying to follow. Mostly I'm just trying to have some variations in the lighter markers and the darker markers. So to blend them, you put down your light color, your darker color, and then just go back over with the lighter marker where the two meet. And I have people fairly often will ask me if that ruins the markers, and it does not. The markers will not bleed. Like the darker marker isn't going to bleed onto the lighter marker when you go over top of it and ruin this marker. This marker is still the same. It doesn't transfer over. So I'm just going to keep adding in these different colors for this galaxy type background. And of course, there's different ways of doing this. This might not be the best way. This is just how I do it. You know, like I said, I'm doing this because I find it relaxing and enjoyable. I try not to get too stressed out about all the little details that, in my opinion, don't really matter that much anyway. Not for what I'm doing. Now, if I was trying to make a living with my art or doing things on commission and trying to be a professional artist, my approach would be very different. But that's not what I'm after, so there's no point in adding stress to what I find to be extremely enjoyable. Because pressure and stress and relaxation do not go together. So you have to know what your goals are and what you're trying to do. Okay, so there is all the color. And if you see any areas, sometimes it's hard to see if you miss some spots. So the only thing that is left to do, and this is optional, and you could always go back and add, like maybe you want to add a nice dark outline around them, or maybe you want to add a lighter outline or some kind of raise. So many different things you can do. There's no limits to the things you can do with your artwork, and that comes back to being open to doing the series of drawings and trying new things. So the last thing I do is I like using these jelly roll pens. They work really nicely over the markers. You do need to make sure that the marker is dry and that the alcohol has evaporated. So it's probably a little bit better to give it a little bit of time and go back in later. The worst thing that'll happen though, if you are trying to add the white before the marker has dried, before the alcohol is evaporated, is that the white will soak into the paper. So if your white isn't showing up as bright as what you would like it to be, it's not a problem. You just go back in over top of it later. Like if you're finding that it's absorbing into the color and not laying on top, just give it a little bit more time to dry and then just go right back over top of it again. It's not really going to hurt anything. And again, I'm not super worried about which way my light source is coming from and all those sorts of things. You may want to. That might be something that you're working on and that's important to you. So then for the background, I like to just make some stars. And that's just different sized dots in the background with the white. You definitely want to make sure you have some variation in the sizes. You could do little starbursts, you could do some little rays of light, whatever it is you want to do, or put a entirely different background altogether. That's another thing you could, if you're doing a series of drawings, you could try out some different background designs. Experiment with maybe doing some scenery in the background or just doing solid colors. Using different colors for this galaxy. So many different things you can try and experiment with and play around with. I think the important thing is just being true to whatever your goals are with your art and having fun and enjoying what you're doing. So that is it for this little alien guy. I hope this inspired you to work on some artwork of your own and keep it fun. Have a good time with your artwork. Make sure you're enjoying it. And happy creating. I will see you soon.
Well, how'd you do? Did you make some of your own artwork? I hope you did. I hope you felt encouraged and motivated to start some of your own work. And I hope you feel inspired to keep working on your art. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like and make sure you subscribe so you can see more videos from us when they get posted. I'll talk to you soon. Happy creating!